Okay, I'm going to try and get this started early instead of going back to sleep after the kids get on the bus. So, yeah, part 7. Tea Party of Bookworms. Good morning, milady. How are you feeling today, Riarda asked. Better than I've ever been. After chugging the ultra-nasty potion and staying in bed so obediently that even Riarda was surprised, my fever had completely vanished. It was a good thing, too, since my health was more important than anything for making this bookworm tea party a success. I got out of my bed and allowed Brunhilde to dress me. I am glad to see that you have recovered, Brunhilde said with a smile as she started doing my hair. We shall go with 2 hairpins today. I wish to use flower ornaments that match the ones added to Schwartz and Weiss's clothes. Meanwhile, Lazleta was preparing my clothes with a quiet smile. These, too, seemed to match what Schwartz and Weiss were now wearing. It appeared that she had added embroidery along the hem of my skirt, which was similar to that on the shoemail's clothes. Not the magic circle embroidery, of course, but rather the floral embroidery along the hem of their skirts and pants. Her dedication was clear to see. Of course, I don't really care how much our outfits match, as long as we're all wearing our library committee armbands. My armband was fastened in place once again. I would give one to Handler as well, and then we would all be matching. Lady Rosamund, please raise your chin so that I may put on your scarf, Lazleta said. I shall tie it into a bow for you. From a distance, she seemed fairly composed, but she was speaking faster than usual, and one could tell when she came nearer that her cheeks were flushed red with excitement. Lazleta, I see that you embroidered my clothes as well as those of Schwartz and Weiss, I said. That must have been quite the endeavor. My greatest fear was that you might not approve, she replied. The embroidery itself was trivial, but no matter how I looked at it, trivial was a grave understatement. I certainly wouldn't want to attempt what she had accomplished myself. I wouldn't. Lazleta's love for shoemills sure has been explosive. As I examined the embroidered skirt, Brunhilde went through the final checks for today's tea party. We're going to be bringing 2 kinds of sweets with us, pound cake with honey and apple sage varieties to choose from, and cookies with tea and walnut varieties. She had also asked the kitchen for jam, cream, and runtoff as condiments. As previously promised, Rosina will be playing more music of your composition, Brunhilde continued. This way, Dunkelfelger's musician may learn them as well. Have we confirmed that Lady Hannelore is bringing her musician, I asked. Of course. Because I was going to be leaving for the Royal Academy sooner than anticipated, we had made several last-minute requests of Hannelore, including that we exchange books and that she receive my songs during our tea party rather than at some later date. She had agreed to them all without any problems. Riarda, do we have the book to return to Dunkelfelger and the new book to give her, I asked. Our plan is to lend her Royal Academy love stories. They are ready, milady. Take care not to forget the manuscript of the book we borrowed from them, rewritten in modern vernacular. I will need to consult Lady Hannelore on whether I may print it. Oh, and her committee armband, too. All prepared, Riarda said with a chuckle. We also intend to let Prince Hildebrand borrow our collection of night stories, correct? I had consulted Ehrenfest over whether I could lend an Ehrenfest book to Hildebrand, and their response had been that I could choose anything except the picture book Bibles, since they were too relevant to our classwork. In fact, they had even ordered me to pay attention to the prince, to avoid speaking exclusively to my bookworm friend for the entire duration of our tea party. They actually wanted me to speak with Hildebrand, even if that meant recommending him a book. Well, I mean, you don't want to ignore a prince, hello. Ferdinand was right. I need to do my best to convert the prince into a bookworm who loves reading too. No, you just need to avoid offending him. Dude, not everything is about books. Even I know that. Our tea party was scheduled for 3rd bell, so at 2nd and a half bell, when morning classes began, it was time for us to go. I headed for the library with my luggage, bird, and retainers. My lady's here. Tea party today. As per usual, the 2 shoemills were there to greet me. Please use the table in my office. My attendants are getting everything ready as we speak, Solange said, leading the way for us. We were having today's tea party in her office, and additional chairs were already being brought in. Let us hurry and complete our own preparations, Riarda said. There is not much time before 3rd bell. And so my attendants got right to work. We had to be more disciplined this year since we knew there was going to be royalty in attendance. The apprentice scholars secured space to take notes, while Rosina began preparing her instruments and practicing before the guests arrived. Solange left us to our preparations and opened the door such that we could now see the rest of the office and the reading room from where we were seated. In contrast to last year, however, there were no students here today. It certainly is rare for there to be no students at all, I remarked. There was a report of a tornado being encountered the other day, so most dormitories are standing guard in shifts to ensure their gathering spots are safe, Solange replied. since only the Sovereign Knights could deal with such beasts. Detecting them as early as possible was key. Are the students of your duchy not doing the same? We were told that the Trnishbefallen was defeated and that there were no signs of any others nearby. We have not made a particular effort to protect our gathering spot, and those among our students who need to gather are doing so. If by chance another Trnishbefallen appears, we will discover it then. The public story was that the Sovereign Knights had defused the Trnishbefallen, since if news spread that we from Ehrenfest had slain it on our own, other duchies will most likely get fired up and try to do the same themselves. Yeah, to try and not get outdone by y'all again. It was definitely for the best, considering that the professors were refusing to teach the spell for making black weapons. When unusual fey beasts appear on the academy grounds, most apprentice knights remain on guard, even when the threat is said to have passed, Solange said with a refined giggle. I see Ehrenfest as a far calmer demeanor. Behind us, Cornelius muttered, We have our hands full enough trying to keep Rosemine under control. Solange didn't appear to have heard him, but that didn't make it any more excusable. Oh, come on. I haven't done any rampaging lately. Well, I haven't done much, at least. I mean, that's part of it wasn't your fault. The stuff involving the prince was definitely just coincidence. Before I could turn around and pout at Cornelius, Solange smiled at me and continued, I am especially pleased that Prince Hildebrand has offered his assistance, she said. Keeping Schwartz and Weiss supplied with mana is not something that a single girl should need to handle alone. Also, Lady Hannelore is an Archduke candidate from Dunkelfelder, is she not? Given the incident last year, I had worried that problems might arise, even if she has no ill intent herself. I noticed that Solange's blue eyes were tinged with sympathy. She had feared that Dunkelfelder would make some unreasonable demands, no matter how Hannelore felt about the matter. But with Hildebrand now in the picture, she could finally rest easy. Perhaps if the sovereignty learns of the state of the library through Prince Hildebrand, they will send archnobles of their own to serve as librarians. Manpower is scarce all over, but they may prioritize sending support to locations that have earned the favor of royalty, Solange continued. Even with Schwartz and Weiss providing their assistance, managing the library was a difficult task for a single single med noble like her. If there is anything I could do to help, you need only say so. I tapped my armband demonstratively. I am a member of the library committee, after all. Solange gave a small, happy smile. Oh, you are already helping more than enough, she said. It seemed that although I wanted to do more traditional committee work, she was fine with me just supplying Schwartz and Weiss with mana. Riarda and the others finished their preparations while Solange and I talked, and soon enough their bell started to ring. Rosina stopped practicing, and a quiet calm returned to the office just as Hannelore and her retainers arrived. I welcomed her, as little taken aback that she had arrived almost immediately after the bell chimed. Welcome, Lady Hannelore. I thank you ever so much for inviting me, Lady Rosemine, Professor Solange. I have been very much looking forward to this tea party, Hannelore said with a smile as we exchanged greetings. Lady Rosemine, I thank you ever so much for striving to keep your promise, despite being busy with your upcoming return. I apologize for any shock that Prince Hildebrand's abrupt participation might have brought you, I replied. Last year when I saw Anastasius at the tea party with the music professors, I was so shocked that it took me a moment to regain my ability to speak. Hannelore had no doubt been just as shocked when she learned that royalty was going to be attending today, and she was probably battling with all kinds of anxious feelings. Or so I thought. Hannelore smiled and elegantly shook her head. It did catch me off guard, but you are not to blame, Lady Rosemine. Requests from royalty simply cannot be refused. It was just a small case of unfortunate timing. She gets the unfortunate timing now. Golly, Hannelore sure is kind. I called royalty over without her permission, and she doesn't mind at all. As I stood there, allowing Hannelore's radiant smile to heal my soul, she instructed the musicians she had brought to prepare seats next to Rosina. She could see that Hartman and Feline were seated and ready to take notes, so she directed her scholar to join them, making her own preparations in short order. Well, she may be quiet and fluffy, but there's no mistaking that she's an Archduke candidate from the Greater Duchy. It was then that I noticed she was occasionally glancing toward the wide-open door to the reading room where Schwartz and Weiss could be seen. I waited for her to finish giving her instructions, and then said to Lady Hannelore, Shall we register you as a member of the library committee before the tea party? That will allow you to touch Schwartz and Weiss. Hannelore blushed as if embarrassed that I had seen through her, and then nodded. Yes, please, she said quietly. Schwartz, Weiss, I called to the two shoemills in the reading room. Register my friend as an assistant. Milady's friend? Register. Schwartz and Weiss walked over their heads, characteristically swaying from side to side. Hanneleore's eyes sparkled when she saw them closer, and she said with a smile, Their clothes match yours, Lady Rosemine. I mentioned that Laisletta had put her all into the embroidery, and by the time I was done, the registration was complete. Lady Hannelore, now you need only put on this library committee armband and touch the shoemill's face stones. I explained as I passed an armband of one of her attendants who helped Handler to fasten it around her arm. He was perfect. She made a perfect library committee member, and now you are matching as well, I said, tapping my own armband. Schwartz mimicked me tapping their armband as well. Handler matching. Oh my, Handler exclaimed. She placed a hand over her mouth and giggled with amusement. How cute. Once our surrounding attendants were looking at Schwartz with warm eyes. Meanwhile, Handler reached out to touch the shoe mills, since she was now able to without consequence. She stroked their foreheads with her eyes closed, basking in delight. So am I now a library committee member? Handler mused aloud. I truly look forward to working with you, Schwartz, Weiss. One of us, Handler, the shoe mills replied. Seeing them standing on either side of the now beaming Handler made them look like one big happy family, which was indescribably heartwarming. I'm so glad that I invited Lady Handler to join our committee. Lady Rosemond, what do library committee members do? Handler asked. I have no such duties except supplying Schwartz and Weiss with mana. That is their most important duty. This can wait until you are done with their classes, Lady Handler, but please visit the library when I'm absent and stroke their face stones. So it is our job to dote upon Schwartz and Weiss, Handler asked, her eyes widening as she looked between Solange and me. Solange nodded with a smile. One requires both light and darkness affinities to activate Schwartz and Weiss. I cannot do this myself, so what I appreciate most is your assistance doting on them and providing them with your mana. The shoe mills will certainly appreciate visitors while their master, Lady Rosemond, is absent, so please feel welcome to visit. Understood, Handler replied, returning a smile that was brimming with excitement. It was at this point that Hildebrand arrived. His attendants handed some sweets that they had brought with them to Brunhilde, who was standing in front of everyone. Well, Hildebrand trotted over to where we were doting on Schwartz and Weiss. I have much looked forward to this blessed day. Thank you ever so much for inviting me, the prince said, albeit rather stiffly, as though he were simply reciting lines he had been taught to say. Yeah, he is. He looked between Schwartz, Weiss, and me several times, then smiled brightly. I see you are all wearing matching clothes today. One of my attendants embroidered them to be similar, I replied, pinching my skirt up a little to show off the embroidery. Wonderful, isn't it? Hildebrand broke into a wide smile. Yes, it's very cute. Oh, and I see Handler is wearing the same armband. Indeed, it is the armband of the library committee. Hildebrand seemed to compare Handler's arm to his own for a moment, and then gazed down at the floor. He looked so sad that I wanted to offer him my own armband, but I swallowed the urge. It would be exceedingly rude for me to give him a possession of my own without his asking for it. At the very least, it would need to be a new one. If you would not find it rude of me, Prince Hildebrand, I would request to have an identical armband made for you, I noted. What do you say? You could do that, the prince replied. Indeed. Unfortunately, I cannot offer you the one I am using myself, and it would not be rude of me to provide you with a new one, would it? I recalled my lectures from Brunhilde about not making decisions without first consulting my attendants, so this time I turned my attention to those accompanying Hildebrand. The prince noticed my gaze and turned, gazing up at his retainers with hopeful eyes. If the prince wishes, one finally said, I do. Then I will have one prepared, I said. My personal seamstress is quite talented. I believe it will be ready by the time I return to the Royal Academy. Now, shall we begin the tea party? Once everyone had been guided to their seats, I signaled Rosina with a glance. She gave a brisk nod in response and started to play the Harpspiel. I could tell that Dunkelfelger's musicians were staring at her hands, focusing their minds on every note. When our attendants began pouring tea, while I described the sweets we had brought with us. Today I prepared sweets that are currently popular in Ehrenfest, I said. This is pound cake, of which we have brought 2 flavors, honey and apple sage. You may eat them with jam and cream of your choosing. These over here are called cookies. Again, we have 2 flavors, tea and walnut. Once my explanation was complete, I took demonstrative bites of the sweets to indicate the lack of poison. Hildebrand was a child who had only recently been baptized, so I prepared pound cake on the sweeter side for him. Handler had eaten these sweets during our tea party last year, and swiftly ordered her attendant to pile her plate with apple sage pound cake and jam. Meanwhile, Solange had her attendant fetch her some honey pound cake and rum toff. Riarda started putting apple sage pound cake and cream on my plate, moving carefully so that Hildebrand's attendant could observe and emulate the process. That, as well as a demonstration from Handler and Solange's attendants, seemed to have been enough. Hildebrand's attendant successfully plated some honey pound cake and jam, as per the prince's request. Once everyone had enjoyed their tea and tasted the sweets, we could finally enter a real discussion. Of course, the first item on the agenda was committee work. I can now relax during my absence, knowing that the both of you will be assisting me as fellow library committee members, I said. Prince Hildebrand is receiving not only an armband, but also a position in the library committee, Handler asked, her red eyes widening in surprise. Will that be possible? It seemed that she had interpreted my earlier offer of an armband as a kind gesture and nothing more. She hadn't realized that the prince was already registered as a library committee member. She seemed worried about whether he could carry out the accompanying duties while needing to hide away in his room to minimize contact with students. As you know, I can't keep coming to the library for much longer, the prince said. It won't be long before too many students start coming here. But let's work together until then, Hannelore. I would be honored to work alongside you, Prince Hildebrand, Hannelore replied. I presume we will only have a few opportunities to meet in the library, unlike Lady Rosamund, who came first in class last year. I am not so quick to finish my lessons, but I am glad to be here with you nonetheless. Solange listened to their conversation with a smile, no doubt relieved that she wouldn't need to worry so much about the shoe mill's mana supply. I am truly glad that both of you joined the library committee, she said. This library quickly falls apart without Schwartz and Weiss. In what way? Hildebrand asked, a serious expression on his face. Solange gave an even broader smile. The books of this library all belong to royalty, so we ask that students return them by their due dates. However, when Schwartz and Weiss are not functioning, many are not returned, and many students remove books without going through the required procedures. Oh my, so they do not return the books despite the fact they belong to royalty, Hannelore asked, blinking several times as though the very idea was foreign to her. The archnobles of the bottom-ranking duchies know that Professor Solange cannot approach them too harshly, no matter what they do, I explained. Their behavior is highly improper as a result. Something must be done about that, Hildebrand declared, exuding a masculine sense of righteousness. They're making a mockery of the royal family. I clapped my hands together in realization. What if Prince Hildebrand were to send the Reminder ordinances this year? The students will surely be tripping over themselves to return their books if a member of royalty personally orders it. Ah. As everyone stared at me in astonishment, Hildebrand alone clapped in response. That's an amazing idea, he said, his purple eyes sparkling. That way I can be like a proper royal, even when I can't stay in the library for long. Prince Hildebrand has made his support clear. What do you think, Professor Solange? You charged ahead without thinking, I think. And excitedly, thinking this will work even better than having Ferdinand send the message. Solange placed a hand on her cheek and gave a troubled smile. I imagine it would prove very effective, but would it really be acceptable for Prince Hildebrand to take such public action? That's what I'm saying. She charged ahead without thinking. Oh, Hanneleore's face. Oh, these two. They are so cute. Alright, I've seen him in the library so many times that I forget he's supposed to be keeping out of the public eye. I will ask Father whether his can be considered a royal duty, Hildebrand said. It seemed that he could do things that were expected of the royal family, although I doubted that prompting students to return books would count. Still, he was excited to have found something to do, so I decided to keep quiet about it. Having a prince and send out those messages would have a huge impact, and I can't bring myself to dash his hopes, so yeah. Lady Rosamund, would you like more tea? Brunhilde asked. She elegantly poured me another cup and added to my plate a few cookies, one of which she flipped upside down in front of me. She's telling me to change the subject at once, I see. Seems like I really shouldn't have said that. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, yes, it would be a good idea, but if it not for the fact that he's supposed to be staying at a site. So, yeah. Although I wasn't entirely sure what the issue was, I decided to bring our current discussion to a natural conclusion. I will entrust this prompting to you if you are granted permission, Prince Hildebrand, but there's no pressure, however. We may simply repeat what we did last year if you are not. Now I just need to think of another topic, appropriate for our tea party. I wanted something that would interest Hildebrand as well, although that was easier said than done. He wasn't officially attending the Royal Academy yet, so talking about classes or people whom only Hannelore and I knew would most likely make him feel excluded. No matter how much I racked my brain, I couldn't think of anything that was appropriate to us at all. What would a prince love to talk about? Dealing with Anastasius had been easy since he had only ever wanted to talk about Eglantine. Pretty much nobody knew what Hildebrand cared about, though. He had just been baptized and generally spent his time hidden away in his room, so I couldn't figure out what to say. Okay, something that everyone here would enjoy talking about then, the only shared thing between us and the Royal Academy. Oh, I've been meaning to ask this, Professor Solange, but do you know of the Royal Academy's 20 mysteries, I asked? I know of many strange tales passed down in the Royal Academy, Solange replied, leaping at this new topic of conversation. I did not think there was 20, however. I too am familiar with them, Hannelore said, added similarly eager for us to move on. That said, I did not think there was 20 either. This seemed to catch the prince's attention. He leaned closer, his bright purple eyes sparkling. The 20 mysteries of the Royal Academy? What are those? Tall tales woven by bored students to amuse themselves, I explained. They morphed over time and fused with the other similar stories such as their origins are as mysterious as their veracity. A scholar whom I know taught me the ones he remembered from when our mothers and fathers were in the Royal Academy. Tell me some of them, Rosemine. My choice of subject was evidently a success. Everyone was looking at me curiously. Unfortunately for Hildebrand, there wasn't much more I could say. I intended to let Solange and Hannelore take the wheel, such that I didn't overstep my boundaries by mistake, although there were a few stories I could touch upon. Well, I know of a statue of the gods that dances on the night of the graduation ceremony, I said. I also know of a gazebo where the goddess of time plays pranks, and a Gwynin set that plays ditter. There is also the Forbidden Archive. I do not know the details of any of those, but perhaps Professor Solange and Lady Hannelore do? I would love to hear more about them as well. Hildebrand gazed up at his attendant. Do you know anything about them, Arthur? Arthur, who looked to be about 20 years old, gave a troubled smile and rested a hand on the prince's shoulder. I believe we should let Professor Solange speak. Attendants were not allowed to lead discussions at tea parties. They need only to stand knowingly in the background. Hildebrand inhaled sharply, having asked purely out of habit. Solange watched the prince's youthful inexperience with a warm expression. Well, where shall I begin, she said. Perhaps the shrine of the two supreme gods. There are shrines to the gods throughout the Royal Academy, but there was once a mischievous student who pulled pranks at this shrine in particular. He received only warnings for his actions since he was not affecting students or professors directly, and so he continued to make them more and more elaborate. One day, however, an especially bright beam of light fell upon him, and he vanished. The student was never seen again. Oh, but where did he go, then? Well, if he's never seen again, then how do you even know where he went? Hello? Hildebrand asked. He and Hannelore looked particularly shaken, but Solange merely smiled and shook her head. Unfortunately, nobody knows. I can say only that the gods see all, even when you think you are acting out of their sight. If you three aren't good boys and girls, then the shrine to the supreme gods at the farthest hall will take you away to the distant heights. It sounds like a moral you tell small children, but the fact that it sounds like it actually happened makes it kind of scary. Ah, yes, and there was a story I recognized among those Lady Rosemine mentioned, Solange continued. There certainly is a gazebo where the goddess of time plays her tricks. It may be some time before this applies to the three of you, but you will want to visit the gazebo with the boy or girl you are romantically interested in. It exists such that Archduke candidates can speak in privacy, since retainers are not allowed under it. Perhaps a day will come when you visit the gazebo for yourself, she giggled and gave us all teasing looks. The gazebo didn't have any walls, which meant the retainers waiting outside could still see what their lords and ladies were doing. If the two romantically brought sound-blocking magic tools, however, they could speak to one another as they liked. Apparently, the gazebo has ended up being associated with the goddess of time because time flew when you were alone with the one you loved. Those inside had no eyes for anything but each other. However, you must not accept invitations to this gazebo lightly. Onlookers will view you and your companion as being romantically involved, Solange explained. It reminded me of Royal Academy love stories. Ah, so this is the gazebo that Sylvester tried so hard to invite Florencia to. Ah, okay, I get it. And that's cute. That is so cute. I was never too sure why he was so obsessed with it, but now I see it's a place where lovers go. When she had said, I will accompany you elsewhere but not there, I had mostly wondered why he didn't just take her up on the offer. I hadn't really understood why Sylvester had pleaded to the gods with unending lines of poetry following Florencia's rejection, but now it all made sense. And as I was nodding to myself, Hannelore went on to talk about another mystery. I am familiar with the Gwynin set that plays ditter, she said. A Gwynin set the size of a baptized child will begin a game in the middle of the night. I am told many have seen it with their own eyes, but I do not know the details. For some reason, whenever I hear the word ditter now, I immediately think of Dunkelfelger. It's all Professor Roffin's fault. I thanked Hannelore for her contribution and then looked at Solange. Professor Solange, do you know anything about the Forbidden Archive? If you're referring to any book storage rooms that cannot be opened, then I know of at least 3, she replied. What? 3? I exclaimed, surprised not only by her answer, but also in part by how smoothly she had delivered it. Solange looked at Hildebrand and his retainers, then carefully nodded. There were previously 3 librarians who worked here. Each had a key, and there is an archive that can be opened only when all 3 are used at once. For security purposes, the location of each key was kept secret to all except the respective librarian. Now that they are gone, these locations are known to none, and there are 3 archives that can no longer be entered. This is not a problem at the moment, as they contain ancient documents that are seldom used. I imagine the keys are in the late librarian's bedroom, so I am awaiting the day when new Archnoble librarians are assigned to us and the archives might be reopened. The temple had a Bible that required a key to open, and it could only be used by those with the High Bishop's express permission. The 3 keys that Solange had mentioned were presumably of a similar design. Just thinking about there being 3 forbidden archives filled me with excitement. Hildebrand and his retainers could serve as a required sovereign archnoble, so perhaps the archives could reopen sometime soon. But wait, is the archive that requires these keys to access the same as the one Justice mentioned that only royalty can enter? Do you know of a forbidden archive that can be entered only by royalty, I asked. I do not know of any such archive, Solange replied. Do you know where it might be? I was very disappointed to learn she couldn't provide any more information, but Hildebrand appeared to be surprised. If only royalty can enter that means I can go inside, he said. It's only a rumor, I noted, so I cannot say whether it truly exists. Especially in a generation such as ours where few remember the old tales. I will ask Mother and Father. They may know some other interesting stories, Hildebrand replied with an amused smile. I instinctively leaned forward at the prospect of receiving stories from royalty. Prince Hildebrand, I would love to hear any interesting stories you might have. By noting them down and asking Justice for more details back in Ehrenfest, it was possible that I could make a book on the Royal Academy's 20 mysteries, which would presumably go in the boys' section alongside the night stories. Oh, right, books. I need to return mine. It was better to do that now than to cause a fuss when it was time for the tea party to end. I glanced to the corner of the table where Hartmut and Feline were recording the conversation. When our eyes met, Hartmut stood up and reached for the book. I nodded. Lady Hannelore, as mentioned, I will soon be returning to Ehrenfest. May I return the book that I borrowed from you now, before it is time for me to leave? Certainly, I will return your book as well, Hannelore turned to her apprentice scholar, who then carried out the exchange of mine. She watched for a moment as both parties examined their books, then turned back to me and smiled. Lady Rosamine, the book you lent me was very easy to read, thanks to it being written in modern vernacular. I had quite a good time with it. In fact, I believe that I may even love Ehrenfest books. Oh my, I'm so overjoyed I can't even speak. The joy is simply too much. The book that Hannelore had read existed only because of the paper that Lutz and the others had made, the printing presses from Johann and his colleagues, and all the hard work of those in the Royal Cat and the Rosamine workshop. I was pleased beyond words that a noble outside of Ehrenfest can enjoy the fruits of our labor as well. And the very thought that I had a friend who loved books and wanted to read them made me want to pray to the gods in appreciation. A blessing's about to come out. Keep it together, me. As I trembled with emotion, Riarda stealthily handed me an empty face stone. I gripped it and started pouring in my mana with a noticeable sigh of relief. Hannelore blinked several times. Is something the matter, Lady Rosamine? Not at all. I was just recalling how much effort went into the creation of that book, and your words of confirmation that it was indeed worth it. I have always wanted a friend to read and discuss books with as we do now. Surely you exaggerate, Hannelore said, regarding me with a modest smile. I will lend you Royal Academy love stories next, I said. It is a collection based on real events that happened during our mother's generations. I do not know who stars in which stories, but Professor Herscher seemed to recognize quite a few of them. Feline brought the book over and handed it to Hannelore's apprentice scholar, who flipped through the pages before passing it to Hannelore. Are there Dunkelfelder stories within? Hannelore asked. There are several stories featuring apprentice knights, some of which may be from Dunkelfelder, I replied. There were, for example, tales about female apprentice knights promising their hands to men who could win dinner games for them. In some cases, the men won, while in others he lost. I personally thought that the stories ending in the former were a lot more likely to be from Dunkelfelder than those ending in the latter, considering the culture there. I cannot wait. If you know of any Dunkelfelder romances, Lady Hannelore, do tell. They make for a good book. If your apprentice scholars were to write manuscripts, I could purchase them with glee. My suggestion was met with sparkling eyes, not from Lady Hannelore, but from her retainers. I wanted them to gather as many stories as they could, so hopefully they would put their backs into it. Lady Rosamine, please allow me to read your Duchy's books as well, Solange said. My line of work has given me quite a universal admiration of new books. I understand exactly how you feel, I replied. Hartmut handed the book of romance-focused night stories he had just taken from Hannelore to Solange. She stroked its cover with a curious look and then carefully opened it. Ehrenfest books are light, convenient to hold, and very easy to read. They even contain the most wonderful illustrations, Hannelore remarked, her cheeks flushing red with enthusiasm as she shilled the heck out of our books to Solange. Solange looked up and gave Hannelore a smile. Indeed, Lady Hannelore, and the fact that Ehrenfest books make a fine young lady such as yourself into a book lover shows me just how wonderful they must be. The conversation filled me with joy, so much so that I was even a little glad to be returning home. I wanted to get back to Ehrenfest right away to praise my Gutenbergs. I'm going to tell them that a Greater Duchy's Archduke candidate loved their work. Lutz will definitely be pleased to hear that. Benno might even jump for joy at how rich he's going to get. Everyone in the orphanage needs rewards too. There wasn't much I could do right now. The food prepared for winter was generally simple and inexpensive due to how much was needed. But I resolved to provide the orphanage with more expensive food come spring. As I made the decision, I noticed that Hildebrand was looking between Solange and Hannelore. He timidly opened his mouth and said, "Rosemine, I would like to read an Aaronfest book too." "So it shall be done, Prince Hildebrand." I gave a silent cheer on the inside. Given my slip-up at the start, I wouldn't have been able to recommend a book without Hildebrand's explicitly requesting it. I turned to Hartman, who gave a copy of the night stories to the prince's attendant, Arthur. The book I lent to Lady Hannelore was centered around romantic night stories, but I believe this one focused on battles will be more to your liking. I made it hoping that it could be enjoyed by children just learning to read. So I imagine that adults will consider it light reading as most. Arthur nodded curtly while looking through the pages and then handed the book to Hildebrand. As Lady Rosemine suggests, I believe this book is of an ideal difficulty for you, Prince Hildebrand. It was hard enough that he wouldn't be able to breeze through it, but not as hard that he would toss it aside in frustration. The prince nodded and said that he would do his best to read the book. I could tell from his expression that he was just pleased to have received a book like Hannelore and Solange. "Now then, I will lend a book to you as well, Lady Rosemine," Hannelore said, presumably having been waiting for me to finish distributing mine. "Clarissa," she looked over at one of her apprentice scholars, who handed a thick Dunkelfelder book to Hartman. "Oh, Clarissa! They have no clue!" "I thank you ever so much. Now I have something to look forward to at home," I said. With a new book in hand, the pain of having to leave the Royal Academy library was significantly reduced. Hannelore was my savior. How is it, Lady Rosemine?" Hannelore asked. "I know the Dunkelfelder books are, thick and hard to read, with all the old language they use." She seemed worried that I wouldn't be able to read the book she was giving me, considering how simple Aaronfest books are written, but I shook my head. "Because of the Bible, I am already used to ancient turns of phrase," I said. "If anything, I am in awe of Dunkelfelder's long and rich history. I enjoyed the last book quite a bit." "So you did enjoy it, then," Hannelore replied, her expression betraying her relief, and with that I had an important request to make. "Excuse me, Lady Hannelore, there is something I must ask. I rewrote your duchy's history book in modern vernacular, but could I ask you to check it for errors?" I asked, holding up the thick manuscript while Hannelore and Clarissa blinked at me in surprise. Clarissa accepted it, then balked while flipping through its pages. "There are quite a lot of pages," Clarissa said. "I do not believe we could check the entire thing today." "Of course, I am not asking with the manuscript to be checked right now, though. I was hoping that you might borrow it." "Then it shall be done later," Hannelore said, accepting my request without protest. "Furthermore, since I have put so much time into this endeavor, I was hoping to make a book based on the manuscript. May I have your permission to do this?" "You would produce a book on Dunkelfelder history in Aaronfest?" Hannelore asked, her confusion clear on her face as she looked at her attendant. "I thought it was great fun to read a book on the history of another duchy, but perhaps I was an exception, or maybe it was just for reference, the kind of material that was never meant to be taken outside of a library." "This is somewhat beyond me to settle on my own," Hannelore eventually replied. May I take the manuscript home with me and consult the Ob?" "You certainly may. I pray that Ob Dunkelfelder allows it." "In that case, I shall lend you documents of my own, Lady Rosemine. Perhaps it will allow you to feel more like a librarian," Solange said, as she handed me some reports. They were apparently very important, and Solange had relied on them to carry out her work when the archnoble librarians disappeared so suddenly. "Some of these cover magic tools that previously operated in the library. Perhaps they will assist you in making your own." These documents weren't to be put on shelves for students to borrow. They were reports that the previous librarians had written as part of their work. Perhaps they would be the most detailed sources on library magic tools out there. "I love you, Professor Solange. Oh my." "Oh. Well, I mean, she is like a grandmother type figure, so I mean, of course she's going to say it." Hartman took the documents from the laughing Solange and set them atop the book we had just received from Dunkelfelder. I followed the rising stack of my eyes. I wanted to start tearing through it right away, but I knew that I would end up completely distracted for the rest of the tea party. My retainers appeared to know this too. Cornelius moved ever so subtly so that he blocked my view of the documents. "Ah ha ha ha! They know you too well." "Arthur, I would like to lend Rosemine something as well," Hildebrand said, turning to his attendant. "Do we have any good books?" I can only assume that royalty were used to receiving offerings without ever giving anything back, but he was so insincere that he immediately thought about lending me a book in return. Wow, he sure is a good prince. I can't believe I'll get to read the Sovereign book. Maybe. As I sat there, moved that I would be able to read books from a new territory, Arthur lowered his eyes and thought. "It would be possible to prepare a book for next time," he said. Then he glanced over at me, "But I imagine she would be better appreciate being invited to the palace library, no?" "Oh no! I was so overwhelmed with glee that I fainted on the spot." "No! Oh, shit. You just traumatized Handler and, Hildebrand. Maybe not Handler, but whatever. The next thing I knew, I was lying in my bed. I had fallen asleep without realizing, apparently. I sat up wondering why I couldn't remember the previous night, and reached for the bell sitting beside me. No sooner had I rung it than Riarda pushed through the curtains around my bed with an anxious expression. "How are you feeling, milady?" "I had the most wonderful dream," I replied. "I was invited to the palace library." "That was not a dream." "But we will need to wait and see whether the king grants us permission." "I am just glad to see you well," Riarda said, but worry swiftly turned to exasperation. At that moment, my memory suddenly came flooding back to me. I had collapsed midway through the tea party after failing to control my mana due to overflowing elation. No! This is the second time I've collapsed at a tea party I was hosting. The second time I passed out in front of royalty. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't good. In fact, it was pretty bad. "Riarda, the tea party. How did the tea party go?" I asked, looking up at her fearfully. "Naturally, it was suspended. We cannot continue in that state," she replied. It seemed that our comfy bookworm tea party had turned into a suspense-laden horror story when I abruptly passed out. The prince's retainers fell into a bit of a panic when you initially noisily collapsed on the floor the moment they suggested inviting you to the palace library. And sovereign archnobles are supposed to be better at containing their feelings than anyone, milady. Arthur, the evident cause of my collapse, had sputtered, "What?" and stood frozen in place with his mouth open wide. It wasn't exactly normal for someone to collapse out of sheer excitement at the mere suggestion of receiving permission for something. "Oh, sorry, Arthur." Hildebrand had seen my corpse-like state and tearfully asked the frozen Arthur, "What happened to Rosemine?" His retainers tried to calm him down, but their cracking voices had given way how anxious they were themselves. "I'm sorry, everyone, I really am. I didn't mean to traumatize." "I knew it, you traumatized the poor kid." You needed face stones from the moment the discussion turned to books," Riarda said. "It's understandable that nothing could contain your excitement when it came to an invitation to the palace library. However, you've once again collapsed in front of royalty, milady." "I can't help that. She can't control that." "She tried. She failed." Lady Handler got teary-eyed as well, no doubt remembering last year. Solange had apparently been just as terrified. "What happened next?" I asked. Riarda explained that she sent an ordinance to Wilfred and Charlotte requesting their help. Upon their arrival, they had consoled the prince's group, explained the circumstances, and settled what issues they could. Meanwhile, Riarda had carried me out with my guard knights while my attendants and scholars cleaned things up. "You will need to thank them both later, milady." "I know." "I sure am a nuisance, aren't I?" As I hung my head, I realized there was one important question that I hadn't yet asked. I nervously looked up at Riarda. When was the tea party exactly? Yesterday or just a moment ago?" 2 days ago. "We have received countless get-well presents and worried ordinances from Prince Hildebrand, Lady Handler, and Professor Solange." I cradled my aching head, and that was when I heard voices from the other side of the curtain, confirming I was awake. It seemed that my female retainers had started to gather in my room after being informed that I was conscious again. "If your mana has calmed and you feel well again, milady, then let us go eat. Lady Charlotte will soon be returning for lunch. Please do show her how much you have recovered," Riarda said. It was only then that I realized I had been dumping mana into face stones while I slept, which explained why I had woken up feeling so refreshed. I climbed out of bed, and when I passed through the surrounding curtains, my retainers all gave collective side looks of relief. "I am sorry to have worried you all," I said. "There is nothing for you to apologize for," Lady Rosamund Brunhilde replied. "To think I would allow you to collapse during a tea party with royalty. I am a failure of an attendant." "You are not." Brunhilde promptly started washing my face and then dressed me, her lips pursed in frustration all the while, but what she had said wasn't true in the slightest. My attendants had worked so hard to ensure that my tea party was a success, thinking up ways to communicate with me through how they served cookies and tea, and memorizing the best times to hand me face stones. There was no way they were failures. "You are not the failure here, Brunhilde. I am, for having fallen unconscious in the presence of royalty on a second occasion," I said, slumping my shoulders, but Lenore quietly shook her head. "This incident can hardly be described as your fault," Lady Rosemont, she noted. "The prince's attendant was simply too good at honing in on your weakest points, as I would expect from someone serving royalty. Furthermore, Lord Ferdinand mentioned in his letters that he might actually have been a boon." "How was it a boon?" I asked, blinking. Flene's eyes wavered for a moment before she spoke. "Because, had you not fallen unconscious, you would have agreed to the proposition on the spot without consulting anyone first." He's right. I really would have. The idea of consulting someone didn't even cross my mind. Talk about lucky. "Because you were unconscious, you missed the date you were supposed to leave the Royal Academy," Riarda said. "But as you cannot leave before apologizing to royalty and the Greater Duchy, Aaron-Vest has granted you special permission to extend your stay. I needed to apologize to the participants of the tea party and inform Adolphine of Dronkel that I would soon be leaving." I suppose I should supply Mana to the library while visiting to apologize. Maybe I should bring a face stone. It feels like something else I'm forgetting, but what? What could it be? As I made my way down to the dining hall, I counted off everything I needed to do before heading home on my fingers. Cornelius was waiting by the stairs and stroked my cheek when I reached him, saying that he was glad I had woken. Apparently, I had almost given him a heart attack. By the time I entered the dining hall, it was already filled with students eating lunch. Charlotte cried, "Sister!" upon seeing me, and all eyes fell on me at once. Everyone had evidently been informed about my collapse during the tea party. Charlotte peered down at my face, her indigo eyes stirring with worry. "Should you not still be resting? Being awake does not mean you are well." "I feel excellent right now," I said, smiling for her sake as she touched my forehead and cheeks all over. "I'm sorry that I worried you, Charlotte." After performing her checks, Charlotte's expression relaxed as though her anxiety had finally dissipated. I turned to Wilfred, who paused in the middle of eating. "I'm sorry for causing more problems, Wilfred. I'm just glad that you woke up," he replied. "Feeling better then?" I nodded, at which point Wilfred returned to his food, describing what had happened at the tea party following Riarda and my departure. He and Charlotte had explained everything to Hildebrand and the others, with Wilfred recounting how he had accidentally knocked me unconscious in the past by dragging me around in my baptism and pelting me with snowballs. Rather than calming Hildebrand down, however, this just made him exclaim, "How could you do that to her?" Whoops. He didn't know. Dude, at the time he didn't know. At the time he didn't know that mine was that frail. The prince was probably in such a panic that he spoke without thinking, but now I can say I've had the rare and valuable experience of rushing to help you only to be yelled at by royalty. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, dear brother. The prince had subsequently been chastised by his retainers, and when they eventually departed, Wilfred had tried his best to cheer Panelor. She kept saying she was fine since she had experienced you passing out before, but I could guess from the way she was very obviously crying that she wasn't fine at all. I thought she was going to pass out too. In the end, Wilfred had seen Handler off to her door much like the year before. "I handled Professor Solon," Charlotte said. "It was my first time being at the location of one of your collapses, sister, and in truth it was quite disturbing for me as well." Now that I thought about it, Charlotte was right. I had never collapsed in front of her before, and I was pretty sure she had never been there for the aftermath either. She had copied Wilfred and emphasized that this happened often, but she had apparently kept thinking about my unconscious form in the Dareve, and was so afraid that she had wanted to cry herself, and yet, despite her fear, she had put on a brave face and consoled Professor Solon while giving instructions to Brunhilde and the others as they cleaned up the tea party. It was hard to believe that it was her first time having to deal with such an accident. Geez, Charlotte is way too mature for her age. "You're going back to Ehrenfest as soon as you have apologized to everyone," Wilfred said, "all right?" Hartman returned to the dorm around when I had finished eating and started to deliver his report before even sitting down to have lunch himself. He had gone to his brewing lesson in the morning and stayed after class to speak with Hersher. "Lady Rosamund, Raymond is requesting a meeting so that he can deliver his research results," Hartman said. "Same for Professor Hersher. What will you do?" "Oh yeah, the thing I forgot was Hersher's disciple. He was the other person I needed to speak with before leaving for Ehrenfest, and finally remembering him took a weight off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized was there. I must go to the library tomorrow morning to deliver my mana and some face stones," I said. "Tell them that they can meet up with me there." "Understood," Hartman replied. "I will send an ordonnance." With that, Hartman swiftly exited the dining hall. I went ahead and asked Lady to prepare some light meals for Hersher and Raymond in preparation for when we saw them at the library. Something told me that these research-obsessed loons hadn't been eating well. After lunch, I sent out ordonnances explaining my recovery. I also apologized for what had happened during the tea party and for leaving the academy in such a hurry. They were all near identical speeches bemoaning my rudeness, with the only variation being in the one I sent to Solange, where I mentioned that I would be coming to supply Schwartz and Weiss of mana tomorrow morning. I similarly told the Dolphin that I was being called back to Ehrenfest due to collapsing at a tea party, and from there I spent the afternoon finishing my preparations to leave. "Lady Rosamund, I am very relieved to see you well. My sincerest apologies, Professor Solange. This happens often when my emotions stir, so please do not think too much of it." I apologized to Solange again, which she received with a thankful sigh, and then handed over a face stone for her to use in my absence. Riarda had used face stones to drain my overflowing mana when I was excited for the palace library, so we had several that were completely full. "Prince Hildebrand and Lady Hannelore are going to be here, so I cannot see you wanting for mana, but I thought I would deliver this just in case," I said. "I thank you ever so much, although I am more concerned for your health," Solange replied. "Please rest well on Ehrenfest. I'm pretty sure I'll end up even busier than I am here." "Probably." We were in the middle of winter socializing, and there was a dedication ritual too. Plus, before I started on any of that, I was sure to receive a massive lecture from my guardians. Oh, I bet that. Not that I would say that out loud when Solange was already so worried about me. Hildebrand is here, came Weiss's voice. I turned to the door and saw that the prince really had arrived with his retainers in tow. It seemed that Schwartz and Weiss could tell the instant their master or any assistant stepped into the library. Or more precisely, they could tell where in the library these people were at all times. Rosemine, are you truly well? Hildebrand asked. We were the same height, so when he looked at me directly like this, I could see the worry clouding his purple eyes all too clearly. Yeah, I can imagine why this whole thing surprised him so much. I doubt anyone as sickly as me usually spends time with the prince. Hildebrand may have ended up bedridden on occasion, but I suspected he would never seen anyone else in such a state, or seen them suddenly fall unconscious for that matter. It must have been real shock. I apologize for the disturbance, I said. I am prone to falling unconscious when emotionally moved. It surprises those who are unprepared as we strive to prevent it from happening by any means possible. It seems that our efforts did not suffice this time. I cannot apologize enough. I also added that the palace library was something of a risky topic for me, but only in my head, of course. I didn't want to give them a reason to take back their invitation. Hildebrand frantically shook his head from side to side. It was surprising, but I'm fine now. As a member of the library committee, I can't let something like that get in my way. I need to be strong enough to help you. Oh, it's so cute seeing him try to act so manly. The prince's eyes seemed to burn with resolve as he clenched his fist and swore to never be so panicked again. It was especially cute that this was his idea of getting stronger. Please take care of Schwartz and Weiss in my absence, I said. I can rest assured knowing that you were here for them. Hildebrand accepted my words with a genuine smile, and at that moment the library was bathed in lights of various colors. Classes were over, which meant Raymond would soon be arriving. Prince Hildebrand, I regret having to say this, but I am due to meet some people here soon. Prince Hildebrand, we must not allow too many people to see you. Now that we have confirmed that Lady Rosamine is well, let us return at once, Arthur said, prompting the regretful-looking prince to leave. He then looked over at me and said, We are relieved to see that you have recovered. The bell rang a short while after Hildebrand disappeared from sight, and not too long after that, Herscher arrived with Raymond. They were both well-groomed, perhaps because they were actually having to leave the laboratory today. These two kind of seem like mother and son. They both have really similar auras, like people that are dedicating their lives to science. You are leaving especially early this year, Lady Rosamine, Herscher said with a displeased expression. I have not gotten as much work done as I had hoped. My guardians back in Ehrenfest are worried about me, considering that I collapsed twice in such quick succession, I replied, of course referring to the Turnus-Raffon incident and the tea party that had followed soon after my recovery. I didn't say much more, since it was being kept secret that Ehrenfest students had been involved, but Herscher understood nonetheless. Ferdinand must be at his wit's end with you, she cackled. Roffin has been talking about holding an inquiry once you have recovered, but that won't be possible if you are no longer here. Leave thanks to me. You have my thanks. The order for my return had come with Roffin, and the other professors were getting ready to hold an inquiry about the Turnus-Raffon incident. To be honest, I appreciated getting the opportunity to discuss things with my guardians first. With all that out of the way, Herscher took several of the documents she was having Raymond carry. These are the results of my research. Please give them to Ferdinand. We also have with us the assignments that Raymond completed for him. Raymond took a hesitant step forward, having been more or less pushed by Herscher, and proffered a bundle of plant paper. I have made improved versions of the given circles, he said. Please give these to Lord Ferdinand as well. I would very much appreciate it if you could tell me his thoughts on them. Hartman accepted the papers with a nod. He and Raymond seemed to have been speaking behind the scenes quite regularly, and I could see the tension drain from the latter's shoulders. Raymond, I'm going to be returning to Ehrenfest, but Hartman will remain here in the Royal Academy to give you your new tasks once they are confirmed, I said. Please use the time until then to finish your classes as well. Eat well and rest, to live a proper life as you would. Oh my, have you become his mother, Lady Rosamine? Herscher asked, exasperated. I glared at him. She was presumably the reason that Ferdinand was so prone to locking himself away in his workshops. Yeah, we were the ones suffering for it. Herscher had gotten away scot-free. If you do not raise Raymond properly, Professor Herscher, then there will be very real consequences, I warned. A person's upbringing has a great impact on their future. So I refuse to remain silent while your disciple's life falls apart. At this rate, he will end up becoming another Ferdinand. Really? Raymond exclaimed, positively delighted. No! Not good! Not good at all. I would now sound so pleased. That was not meant positively. I shook my head and then presented the light meals that Lazelight had prepared. I imagine you were focused on your research until the last moment before this meeting, and therefore had no time for lunch. Please eat this and spend the rest of the day resting. You truly are a saint, Lady Rosamine. I'm touched, said not Raymond, but Herscher, her hands trembling with emotion as she accepted the basket of food. She really was a no-good teacher. Professor Herscher, do not forget about your classes, I said. And remember, Raymond. Ensuring that your teacher does her job is an important part of being a disciple. With that, our meeting came to an end. Okay, that's that. All she has to do now is apologize to Hannelore, I think, and I think then she can leave. Or maybe she already... Whatever. I believe that's everything I said after finishing my last checks on the way to the dormitory's teleportation room. Okay, so we don't even get to see that. Okay. Wilfried, Charlotte, and my retainers were going to be seeing me off. Shouldn't be anything to worry about if you've checked everything on the list, Wilfried said. Now head on home and get ready for the scolding of a lifetime. They ordered you to stay away from the prince, you know, and what did you do? You collapsed at a tea party, guaranteeing that he'll never forget you. Everyone back in Ironfest is pretty much banging their head against a wall at this point. Cornelius was on the teleportation circle with me, but he wasn't going to be staying in Ironfest. He intended to enjoy his last term at the Royal Academy to the fullest, meaning he would return to the dormitory as soon as he had ensured my safe arrival. I was heading home so early this year that Judith and Lenore hadn't even finished all their classes yet. Daniel and Angelica are in Ironfest, so I won't have any problems with guards, but going back home by myself makes me feel a little bit lonely, I admitted. Please try to return to us as soon after the dedication ritual as possible, Charlotte said with a smile. I was entrusting Rosina to her in my absence, and it was heartwarming to know that a fellow female Archduke candidate was going to be here to take my place while I was gone. You don't need to worry about us, Rosamine. Now that we've got Charlotte, things won't be as bad as last year, Wilfried assured me. At the very least, I won't have to go to any of those girl-only tea parties. Both Charlotte and I giggled at his remark. Riarda, Cornelius, let us go, I said. I stepped into the teleportation circle with Riarda and Cornelius, and after a sudden flash of black and gold, my vision began to twist. The epilogue! Ew, is this going to be Rosamine's point of view, or... Oh no, this is probably Sylvester. This is Sylvester and the others. Everyday reports came from the Royal Academy. Sylvester cleared his office of retainers to read them all alone with Karstedt and Ferdinand. The reports up until classes began were peaceful. Rosamine rejoiced over the dormitory's new bookcase and was more grateful to Wilfried than ever before. And although Charlotte expressed some concern over Rosamine's bizarre style of greeting that prioritized books above all else, such things warranted little more than a chuckle. Students of the former Veronica faction had requested to offer their names to Rosamine, but Rosamine was exceedingly reluctant to carry such a heavy burden. So that was on hold for now. Even after the fellowship gatherings, the reports that arrived were still relatively peaceful. It was a surprise that Dronkel had already managed to emulate Rinsham, but that had been expected to happen eventually. There was also a report about how Bettina from Ahrensbach was leaking information, but that too was expected. It was the very reason she had married into Ehrenfest in the first place. The only point of worry was that the third prince had attended the fellowship gathering despite having not yet been debuted, but the actual risk was minimal since he was going to be staying in his room. Oh, dude, you have no idea. If we do find ourselves with another problem on our hands, it will no doubt be due to Rosamine somehow getting involved with him, Ferdinand mused. Don't say that, Ferdinand, Sylvester barked. The prince is staying in his room. They'll never meet. It's just not going to happen. Ever. Wrong. Wrong. Or rather, that's wishful thinking, I should say. Naturally, Sylvester shared the same fears as Ferdinand. Given how Rosamine had ended up interacting with royalty the year before, it was impossible to imagine her finishing her second year at the Royal Academy without incident. Oh, you're right. Of course, once lessons began, the reports that arrived in Ehrenfest became anything but peaceful. Rosamine dragged a Dunkelfelger Archduke candidate into her so-called library committee, supplied Mana to several magic tools within the library, formed divine instruments in her stat forming class, attacked a teacher with one of the charms that Ferdinand had. That's not her fault. She didn't do that on purpose. Had given her, and tore apart the canopy of her bed with a toy she had powered up. Sylvester, Ferdinand, and Karstedt all sighed wearily as they read the incoming reports one after another. There were so many that simply reading them was exhausting. Sylvester put a hand on his forehead and started massaging his temples. Ferdinand, why is Rosamine always so extreme? Do not ask me. It seems that Rosamine's understanding of the word peaceful differs considerably from our own. We will need to correct this, Ferdinand replied, heaving another sigh as he scratched his head. He seemed to be extremely drained. Karstedt was similarly spent from the daily reports. To think she'd caused this many problems in less than a week, he muttered. I think it's safe to say she has a talent for troublemaking at this point, which is the last thing we need. Sylvester realized something terrible indeed. Despite them having received so many reports, not even a week had passed. That explained why they hadn't yet heard from Herscher. Reports continued to flood in. The second years had all passed their written lessons on the first day. There was a request for advice on dealing with a tea party invitation from Jawonkel. Rosamund had resolved to accept Roderick's name, and much was learned from the music professors during their tea party. The questions regarding tea parties and socializing was sent not just to Sylvester, but to Ferdinand, Florencia, and Elvira as well. Men and women tended to have different perspectives on such matters, and Sylvester believed that having a variety of answers would prove useful. Ehrenfest's rise to the Royal Academy's ranks and its association with new people had made the Archduke Conference a struggle for the adults. So it naturally followed that the children in the Royal Academy would struggle as well. It seemed as though they were better at managing Rosamund's words and behavior than they had been the year before, but the troubling reports continued to flood in. They were received with the usual concerning smiles. But everything changed when Rosamund encountered the Third Prince again. Rosamund went to the library to arrange when to change Schwarzenweiss's clothes, and while she was there, she seemed to have met with Prince Hildebrand. Is this normal? From Charlotte. Rosamund isn't worried and says they'll never see each other again since the prince is avoiding other students. Even so, somehow, I've got a bad feeling about this. From Wilfried. Your dad does too, Wilfried, and I've got a real bad feeling about this. So it finally happened, Ferdinand said. Why are you so calm about this? So far they have met with one another, but nothing has happened. The problems are yet to come, and that's why you must calm down, Sylvester. If we panic now, we will not survive the upcoming reports, Ferdinand replied, waving his hand dismissively. Ferdinand, you're much better at this than Sylvester is. You really should have been the Archduke, but whatever. How could Sylvester remain composed when Rosamund was somehow meeting with a prince who wasn't even supposed to be attending the Royal Academy? How can I stay calm when you're saying the bad times have only just begun, Sylvester exclaimed. Now I'm even more worried. Problems will now be occurring at a highly accelerated rate, Ferdinand continued. After what we've experienced last year, this much should be obvious. Just look at this report from Hartmut if you wish to be terrified even further. He held out a report with a thin smile. It seemed that he was equally disturbed on the inside. He was just exceptionally good at hiding his emotions. Lady Rosamund began reading immediately after greeting the prince, but he appears to have taken an interest in her, no doubt because she looked as young as he does. He went out of his way to climb up the second floor to watch her read. Really? Oh, it's so cute! From Hartmut. Sylvester wanted to scream, Please, can't you leave my kids alone? But he somehow contained the urge. Ferdinand, do you know a way to keep Rosamund from ever meeting with the prince again? He asked. As I'm sure you know, we cannot just prevent her from going to the library. Getting access to it was the very reason that she passed all her classes on the first day. Trying to contain her would have too great of an impact on other things. You do not want to make the same mistake that Wilfried made last year, do you? Sylvester fell silent, recalling how disastrous it had been for everyone when Rosamund had been kept away from her precious library. Carset shrugged. There's no stopping her from visiting the library, and we can't do anything about the prince's actions. All we can do is pray to the gods that he contains himself and stays in his room like he should. Praise be to the gods. Prayers be to the gods. Oh, it's going to be prayers fall on deaf ears here. Ehrenfest, we have an urgent message from the Royal Academy. Rosamund wasn't the only one causing unnecessary chaos. Herscher, the Ehrenfest dormitory supervisor, was raising an Ahrensbach student as her primary disciple. We were planning to invite Professor Herscher to the changing of Schwarzenweiss's clothes the day after tomorrow, but what should we do? From Marianne. This is a very dangerous situation, as Ehrenfest secrets could be leaking to Ahrensbach through Professor Herscher's disciple. Are there any problems with the documents we have already given her? From Ignace. Is there any way we can turn her disciple Raymond into an information source for ourselves? He associates with Professor Gundolf, so I believe he may be leaking our research to Jerwanko as well, from Hartmut. Raymond is very skilled when it comes to modifying magic circles. He improved one of mine and even taught me how to do it myself. Also, he really wants to read Ferdinand's book. Can I lend it to him? From Rosamund. Sylvester was dumbfounded. Rosamund, why are you the only one not worried about this? Aren't you the one Ahrensbach ambushed? At once he was struck with the overwhelming urge to scream and poke her cheek. Rosamund, you better be ready. He's gonna do it. Oh, so that's what he does to punish her. He pokes her cheek. And it's gonna bug her. To infinity. I understand that she's moved to the sovereignty, but I'd rather Herscher showed our duchy a little more consideration, Karstedt said. It was an extremely normal reaction for an Ehrenfest noble, but Ferdinand met the remark with a harsh glare. Why should she when Ehrenfest shows her no consideration, he replied. Do not be so self-centered. What do you mean? That's his teacher you're talking about here. Ferdinand grimaced and then explained. It seemed that back when Herscher had taken Ferdinand as a disciple, she had ended up being exposed to Veronica's cruelty as well. She had no longer been able to rest peacefully in the Ehrenfest dormitory, and it was for this reason that she had started sleeping in her laboratory even more regularly than before. Oh, that's why she sleeps in the laboratory, because it's a habit now because of Veronica. Great. Veronica's reach still happens. Ferdinand dryly noted that the financial support usually given to the dormitory supervisor had promptly been stolen away by those serving Veronica, such that Herscher received no help whatsoever. These events had taken place after Sylvester had graduated from the Royal Academy, so he knew very little about Ferdinand and Herscher's past. He struggled to believe that Ferdinand had endured so much considering the man's achievements, but he had come first in class in every single year, received direct praise from the king himself, formed personal connections with greater duchies, and made an extraordinary amount of wealth for a student by selling magic tools and materials. My mother took away the dormitory's help, Sylvester asked. If you knew this, why didn't you say anything when we imprisoned her? How many years has it been now? How can you be so passive about this when your own teacher is struggling? Herscher made it clear that she neither wants nor needs help, so it would only obstruct the raising of her apprentices. It was how she protected me while I was in the Royal Academy, Ferdinand said. That was why, out of respect, he had supported Herscher with some of the earnings he made from his magic tools. Oh. Sylvester finally understood why Ferdinand was so close with Herscher, even after his graduation, but at the same time he felt helpless. Ferdinand, please. You need to tell me these things sooner, he said. I may be the Archduke, but I can't act on a problem I don't know about. It makes me feel pathetic. The things your mother did are nothing but unpleasant, and I have no wish to remember them. Forgive me. Ferdinand replied, his voice cracking slightly as he spoke. Oh. Ferdinand doing that is not a good thing. Yeah, those had to have been very unpleasant memories. His eyes were downcast and his brow was slightly furrowed. Sylvester could hardly press him any further after that. You're forgiven. Ferdinand exhaled and then stood. I will go to the Royal Academy. Wait, Ferdinand. Adults can't just go and get involved. You know this. That's why these reports are so painful. Sylvester was limited to venting his frustrations through replies, as they all presumably were, but Ferdinand waved a hand to dismiss the idea. It will not be an issue, he said. It is understood that magic tools must be dealt with by those who created them. I will simply exchange a few words with my teacher while I'm there. Herscher will not listen to anyone else. You know this to be true. In short, Ferdinand intended to go to the Royal Academy under the guise of retrieving some magic tools he had left with Herscher. Fear not, Ferdinand reiterated. We will not bring harm to Ehrenfest. That's not what I'm worried about, Sylvester replied. I thought that speaking with Herscher might bring back some memories that you'd rather not remember, but all right, I'm leaving this to you. A wise choice. That same day, Ferdinand sent word that he would soon be coming to the Royal Academy, and the next afternoon he departed with Eckert and Justice. He returned at night looking extremely refreshed, and there was a great number of magic tools with him. The next day, Sylvester learned that his prayers had not reached the gods. Such as he feared, a report arrived to say that Rosemont had met with the prince again. Today we changed Schwartz and Weiss's clothes. I was able to touch them for the very first time since Lady Rosemont granted me her permission. The new outfits suit them very well. Prince Hildebrand came to watch midway through, and the next thing we knew, he had agreed to become an assistant for supplying the shoe mills of Mana from Marianne. The prince had arrived midway through the changing and ended up an assistant? Wait a moment, Sylvester exclaimed. Rosemont's their master, and the prince is her assistant? It's supposed to be the other way around. It was just yesterday that I went to the Royal Academy to settle problems. How are there new ones already? Ferdinand muttered. If you had stayed a day later, you would have seen all those go down. Because you would have been there to help change the shoe mills. You would have. There was a distant look in his eyes that Sylvester could fully understand. Karlstead, read these. The situation is beyond headache-inducing. Karlstead accepted the stack of reports, then he pressed a hand to his forehead and groaned. Sylvester took the reports from the man's weary, free hand, and after pumping himself up, started reading them in turn. Rosemont and Prince Hildebrand were being quite friendly with one another. It seemed to me that the prince thinks highly of Rosemont. His expression when speaking with her was entirely different from when he spoke of Wilfried. She seems to like him in turn, in fact. She was staring at him as intensely as she would stare at a book. Oh. She ended up asking me what I thought of younger men. I attempted to guide her back to Wilfried, but he will need the courage to agree that she can do whatever she likes with her own library. From Charlotte. The prince appears to like shoe mills, but it seems to me that he is more interested in Lady Rosemont. She in turn became enamored by the prospect of the palace library. We must be careful. It seemed that the prince mistook Lady Rosemont for Lady Charlotte, and now Lady Rosemont has mistakenly concluded that he is romantically interested in her sister. Afterward, Lady Rosemont was asked to relinquish her position as the magic tools master. She avoided this by pointing out that Prince Hildebrand would struggle to provide the shoe meals with Mana while he is still unable to act publicly, and that he will end up being called Milady despite being male. The prince ultimately settled on helping with the provision of Mana as an assistant from Hartmut. We changed Schwartz and Weiss's clothes today. It turns out that Professor Solange lives in the library. I'm very jealous. I want to live in a library too one day. Oh, also, Prince Hildebrand came when we were changing their clothes. He wanted to know how Charlotte feels about younger men, so I ended up asking her, but it turns out she's all about her big bro. I wish she was all about her big sis. She actually wrote that. From Rosemine. Is it just me, or does Rosemine live in an entirely different world from everyone else? Kind of. She did, at one point. Sylvester mused aloud. Her report has seemed to be mostly about Solange's living conditions, which nobody else had even mentioned, and her own plans for the future. The prince's arrival came across as an afterthought more than anything. Rosemine simply cannot socialize, Ferdinand said, rubbing his temples. And she's going to be interacting with royalty like this? Karstedt asked, his hand similarly on his head. Give me a break, please. Ferdinand, can you bring Rosemine back? Sylvester asked. At the very least, we need to wait things out until the prince stops visiting the library. She has only recently been allowed to start visiting the library herself, so no. I suggest we threaten her by saying that we will order her home the next time she does something. The three cradled their heads, but this was only the beginning of the chaos. Rosemine sent me these questions, Ferdinand said. I ended up inviting Prince Hildebrand to a tea party in the library. Would it be safe for me to let him borrow some Ehrenfest night stories? Is there anything I should watch out for? From Rosemine. How and why did she end up inviting a royal to a tea party? Sylvester cried. Is she just being cocky or what? Ehrenfest only ever invited royalty to tea parties during the Archduke Conference. Inviting someone to a tea party was more draining and required a lot more effort than simply being invited. So doing everything to the appropriate standard was going to be impossible for someone like Rosemine, who couldn't even manage regular socializing. I can't imagine her being so focused on her bookworm friend that she ignores the prince I can't imagine she doing that. Ferdinand said, evoking an image that Sylvester could see all too easily. It would be unimaginably rude, but Rosemine would do it without fail. Have her decide on discreet signals with her attendants to be used when she is neglecting the prince too much. The topic needs to be changed, and the like. It would also be wise to bring an abundance of face stones since her emotions are sure to flare out of control. The instant the conversation turns to the exchange of books. Together they wrote up all the plans they could and sent them to Rosemine's retainers, making sure to explain in no uncertain terms that Rosemine was not to neglect the prince in conversation. Soon after they had all sent their replies, however, they received an emergency letter from Charlotte. This year, it felt as though they were receiving nothing but emergency letters. The children of the former Veronica faction left to hunt Fabies, but Roderick returned injured. Wilfrid departed to help the apprentice knights, while sister tended to Roderick, and when she asked Roderick what had happened, we learned that a Turnishbefallen was responsible. Sister has since left with her guard knights to grant the apprentices blessings of darkness. We've contacted the professors, but is there anything else I should do? From Charlotte. A Turnishbefallen? What even is that? Sylvester asked, having never heard the name before. This is problematic, Ferdinand muttered, and promptly started on his response. He warned the apprentice knights not to attack the Turnishbefallen, to take turns provoking it, and to buy time until the Sovereign Knight's order arrived. They are Trombe-like Fabies that appear around workstock. Only black weapons work on them. Come again? Karstedt explained. That's terrible. We must go at once. Ferdinand shook his head. No, Karstedt. We cannot send our own knights. All we can do is rely on the sovereignty. A duchy could only send its knight order to the Royal Academy at the request of the sovereignty. Doing so under any other circumstances was tantamount to invading sovereign territory. Karstedt could only watch with gritted teeth as Ferdinand wrote his reply. As soon as Ferdinand was done, he briskly walked to the teleportation hall and instructed the knight standing guard to deliver his letter. Charlotte's reply came immediately, likely on indication that she had been waiting by the teleportation room. We have already informed them. The Turnishbefallen was attacked when it was first encountered and grew as a result. But the apprentices have split into groups and are now stalling for time, from Charlotte. So someone there knows the Turnishbefallens, They must be quite the academic, Ferdinand remarked, exhaling in relief. The three guardians agonized as they waited the next update, and after what felt like an age, another report arrived. They defeated the Turnishbefallen, but Sister collapsed. Nobody else was hurt, from Charlotte. As long as the Turnishbefallen was defeated, we must be satisfied. As worried as I am about Rosemine, her collapsing is nothing new, Karstedt said. He had waited on tenterhooks, itching to leap up and rush over with reinforcements, but now the tension drained from his shoulders. Sylvester, too, was relieved. A new day brought with it new reports. I made the necessary preparations and headed out as soon as Roderick told us what happened. Matthias said we needed to buy time until the professors arrived, so I suggested we take turns dealing with the Turnishbefallen. Rosemite arrived while we were doing that, and she blessed our weapons with darkness, enabling us to start attacking. The beast was hard to hit since it moved so fast, but Rosemite managed to block its vision with the black cloth midway through the fight, allowing us to launch a massive attack all at once. It was my first battle, but my contribution came in second place. From Wolfried. Lady Rosemite truly is a saint. Her expression was impeccably heroic as she blessed the weapons with darkness, and the words of her prayer were as fluid and majestic as if she had been playing an instrument. The Trinish Fallen was clearly more on guard against Lady Rosemite than anyone else. It carelessly took blows from the other knights, but was fixated on avoiding her water gun. Upon deducing that her attacks would continue to be evaded, Lady Rosemite restrained the Trinish Fallen with the God of Darkness's divine instrument. If not for her contribution, we would not have been able to defeat the beast. And that is not all. Lady Rosemite also produced Flue-Train's staff, and through a ritual, completely repaired the gathering spot. I saw a divine miracle with my own eyes, and it was extraordinary. Praise be to the gods from from Hartman. By the time the professors and the Sovereign Knights arrived, the fight was already over. They sent out inquiries regarding the details of the hunt and Ehrenfest's temple affairs, and it seems that the Trinish Fallen came from the direction of the Workstock dormitory. Students should not be able to use the Darkness Blessing, so publicly the story is that the Sovereign Knights Order defeated the Trinish Fallen. From Charlotte. Are you sure these reports are all about the same thing? Sylvester asked. There was no doubting it, considering that the Trinish Fallen is mentioned in each one, Ferdinand replied, but even then it was hard to believe. Well, they did a good job, Karstedt said. That much is for sure. Yep, that's not a Fabi students should normally come across. Surely, it seems like they make good Trombe hunters when they grow up, Sylvester agreed with a nod. Ferdinand was rubbing his temples and grumbling. Sylvester, call Rosemite back as soon as she recovers, he said. We must discuss things at once. The blessing. I expect that Rosemite used the prayer directly from the Bible, which differs somewhat from the spell taught to knights. I wish to speak with her regarding this before she is questioned. And so, as per the suggestion, Sylvester ordered Rosemite to return. Despite Rosemite having been ordered to return as soon as her tea party with the prince was complete, what came through the teleportation circle was instead a stack of papers. Ferdinand thumbed through them, then squeezed his eyes shut and said, "Let us return to your office, Ab Ehrenfest," with a smile that did not reach his eyes. It seemed that more problems had occurred. Once they were in Sylvester's office, Ferdinand started reading a report from Hartman aloud. Dunkelfelger's Archduke candidate was registered as an assistant before the tea party began. The prince wanted a library committee armband, and Rosemite had promised to get him one. What is Rosemite thinking? Last year there was the whole thing with the hairpins, and now she's taking business orders from royalty again? God, of course she isn't thinking. Sylvester vigorously massaged his forehead as he read the reports, but it seemed that Ferdinand wasn't content to let their suffering end there. As they were peacefully discussing books, Rosemite suddenly suggested that the prince send out ordinances telling students to return their overdue books. What? Karstedt shouted on instinct. She dumped work on royalty? Sylvester cried out, and in almost the same time, what was she thinking? She wasn't thinking. She wasn't thinking about this as possibly a bad thing. This is why I said she overstepped. She charged ahead without thinking again. Everyone else there no doubt thought the same, Ferdinand said. I shall continue reading the report. I don't want to hear it, but Sylvester took a moment to brace himself. Alright, go ahead. A member of royalty would normally be enraged to receive such a brazen request, but the prince had rejoiced over Rosemite's non-standard suggestion and said that he would consult the king. It was all so sudden and so bizarre that nobody on either side had been able to comprehend what was going on, let alone stop them. Even the prince's retainers were dazed. It seems. We are lucky that Rosemite avoided a rebuke here, Ferdinand said. Lucky, sure. But am I the only one who's starting to think this Rosemite-Prince combo is dangerous? Sylvester replied. Maybe because Prince Hildebrand was raised as a vassal to begin with, he didn't have much of the dignity or pride that one expected from royalty. Otherwise, he never would have rejoiced over Rosemite's insulting proposition. The more dangerous we believe the situation is, and the more we try to pull them apart, the closer Rosemite will end up becoming with him, Ferdinand warned. At the moment, I'm just grateful that I'm not one of the retainers having to attend these tea parties, Karstedt said, though in an ideal world, I wouldn't even have read these reports. We would not allow you alone to escape this burden. Give up and endure. This is your daughter, Ferdinand replied with a scoff. What Sylvester wanted to say, yeah, and you're her guardian, but he stayed quiet and simply listened as Ferdinand continued to summarize the report. It seemed that Rosemite needed to use a face stone while exchanging books with Dunkelfelger, as Lady Handler praised the quality of our duchy's books. She needed a face stone after just a little praise, Sylvester asked. Good thing we made sure she had them on hand. I recall that simply becoming friends with Lady Handler was enough to make her pass out last year. Sylvester grimaced. She passed out because of that? I gotta say, this Lady Handler must have a pretty strong spirit. I wouldn't want a friend who would collapse at the drop of a hat. She is from Dunkelfelger. Her fearlessness should come as no surprise. Karsted's expression turned contemplative. It's hard to tell whether Rosemine is maturing or regressing. She's passing out more often than she used to before the Jarifs, he said. Her body is stronger, but she has more mana as well. She is not collapsing any more or less frequently than before, Ferdinand said with a slightly bitter expression, and then returned his attention to the report. It seems that when Rosemine and Lady Hannibal were exchanging books, Prince Hildebrand grew somewhat envious and mentioned that he wished to be involved as well. One of the prince's retainers suggested that Rosemine be invited to the palace library, and in that instant, Rosemine fell unconscious. She collapsed in front of royalty again? She collapsed while hosting a tea party again? Sylvester and Karsted shouted at the same time while Ferdinand frowned and glared at the report. It's not her fault? Yeah. How on earth did the tea party continue from there, Sylvester asked, impatiently snatching the report from Ferdinand. How was it suspended, and what happened during the aftermath? The sovereign's retainers were in disarray. The prince wept, and Lady Hannibal repeated that she was fine as she attempted to stifle a sob. We sought assistance from Lord Wolfried and Lady Charlotte, who swiftly arrived to handle the matter. From Hartmut. Wolfried and Charlotte, huh? I get the feeling that they aged a few years just from dealing with Rosemine. Yeah, probably. That was one heck of a tea party, Sylvester muttered. So what's our plan? We must demand a mountain of answers from Rosemine before we can decide what actions to take, Ferdinand replied. For now, having her apologize to those involved and order her to return. If we do this immediately, we can use her collapsing as an excuse. My intention was to send her back to the Royal Academy after hearing the circumstances, but that idea is now dead in the water. We will keep her in Ehrenfest until the dedication ritual concludes. His tone made it clear that he had almost given up and was throwing things at the wall to see what stuck. Sylvester wanted to give up too. His head ached worse than last year. Karsted seemed afraid to speak at all, which Sylvester likewise sympathized with. How does Rosemine cause so many problems like this? Peaceful, if a word existed that was antonym to Rosemine, it was peaceful. Oh my god, she didn't do this on purpose! The stuff with the prince initially was coincidental. It was just a coincidence. She didn't see that coming. None of them did. But, I mean, you can't really have the tea party with Solange while Hildebrand is there and him ask and you refuse. You know, that's rude. So, I mean, that was not her fault. Hold on, let me see. How long have I been recording for? 1 hour and 17 minutes. How long do I have left on this? 35 minutes. Or 35 pages. I think I might end this off here. I might make the other one a shorter one. I'm not sure. But I will see everybody in the next one.